Marine Le Pen hits the campaign trail ahead of the French presidential election in April. That's after a court reduced her ban on seeking public office. She'll be running for a fourth time. But is this the best chance yet for her far-right party to take power? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the programme. I'm Tom McRae. A French court has cleared the way for the leader of the far-right National Rally to run for president in April. The ruling reduced and suspended Marine Le Pen's prison sentence and ban on seeking public office. But her conviction for an EU Parliament job scam was upheld. She will have to wear an electronic monitor for a year while on house arrest. Le Pen has said it will prevent her from campaigning and plans to challenge the decision in France's highest court. But she is leading in opinion polls. So will her candidacy take her all the way to the Elysee Palace? Or will voters, wary of Le Pen's nationalist, anti-migrant policies, unite around a common rival as they have in the past? We'll discuss all of this with our guest shortly. But first, this report from Felix Nawara.
She went into court uncertain of her political future, but emerged from the hearing with her path cleared to run for president of France. Appearing on primetime news later that night, Marine Le Pen said the ruling would allow the French people the opportunity to choose.
I was happy that the French people were given back their freedom to vote and that the court restored my eligibility to stand for election.
It's an announcement set to shape French politics ahead of elections in April, and one that's given her far-right National Rally party an extra spring in their step. Le Pen has previously run for office 3 times. Opinion polls suggest her fourth attempt is her best chance yet to make it to the Elysee Palace. But that's if she passes her next major test, that of winning the public trust.
What we generally see in our polls is a very strong accusation regarding politicians, that they are corrupt, and in general a rejection of politicians who are facing legal proceedings.
While most of Le Pen's remaining prison sentence was suspended, she has to serve 1 year under house arrest and with an electronic ankle monitor. She says the tag effectively bars her from campaigning and that she will challenge the verdict at France's highest court. Over the years, she worked to rebrand the National Rally. It was founded in the 1970s by her father, a soldier in France's colonial wars and a convicted Holocaust denier. Many credit her with bringing the party into the fold of mainstream politics. But her latest bid has caused anxiety among some in France and across Europe. The National Rally is nationalist and anti-immigration. It's critical of France's role in NATO and it's against further integration into the European Union. The party also opposes military aid to Ukraine. But it's not a straight path to victory for her. President Emmanuel Macron's centre-right former Prime Minister Edouard Philippe is also running, as is leftist candidate Jean-Luc Mélenchon. With less than 10 months to the election, the vote is already being seen as perhaps the most definitive in recent French politics. Felix Nawara, Al Jazeera for Inside Story.
Let's bring in our guest now. From Paris is Bruno, Cautres, Professor at the Centre for Political Research at Sciences Po. From Toulouse, Sara Alouane is a legal scholar specialising in civil liberties and constitutional law. And from London is Victor Mallet, a senior editor and former Paris bureau chief at the Financial Times. He also wrote the book Far Right France, Le Pen, Bardella and the Future of Europe. Thank you so much for joining us today on Inside Story. We really do appreciate your time. Sara, if I can begin with you, can you just give us your initial thoughts on the court's ruling? Does this potentially change the direction of the future of France? Are the repercussions that great?
Thank you for having me. Well, I think first and foremost, for the sake of clarity, the first point is really to make the difference between the legal issues at stake and the political consequences, because much of commentary risks conflating both of them. So this judgment is clearly not an exoneration. Okay, the Paris Court of Appeal confirmed Marine Le Pen's conviction for the very serious offense of misappropriation of public funds, so détournement de fonds publics. What changed in the appeal, and that's really key, is not the finding of guilt, but the sentence. And this is quite important because the legal and the political consequences are different. The court reaffirmed the criminal responsibility of Le Pen, but at the same time modified the sanctions in a way that fundamentally will change the presidential campaign landscape.
Right. Okay, Bruno, that's the legal consequences. But politically, from a political point of view, I mean, is this a defeat or a lifeline for Le Pen?
I think that actually it doesn't change that much at the moment for Marine Le Pen, because actually the Rassemblement National actually is on today, probably the strongest party in France. They've got an amazing big victory for the last European elections. They did extremely well in the last legislative elections. The popularity of Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen for weeks and weeks is at the top. So I would say that at the moment, it doesn't really change that much. Let's see what is going to happen during the campaign, how the other candidates are going to use that legal argument against Marine Le Pen. And let's probably look carefully to the next polling and the next voting intention. But at the moment, I doesn't think it does, but it changes a lot. It's going to change a little bit the tonality of the Rassemblement National campaign, because it's not the same thing to have Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, not the same age, not the same generation, not exactly the same policy agendas.
Okay, Victor, if we can bring you in here. You've obviously researched the rise of the far right in France for many decades now and have a deep understanding of what is behind it, what's going on. How do you view this decision and what it means for the far right and Marine Le Pen going forward?
I think it's a positive for the far right. It gives them an even better chance, I think, of winning the presidential election and perhaps even the legislative election that would follow next year. So, they have, unusually for a big political party, they have two candidates who could have been presidential candidates. And they're the two candidates, Jordan Bardella and Marine Le Pen, who are the most popular in France, according to the opinion polls. So the double ticket, which is what we effectively have now, and as Marine Le Pen said yesterday, is her for president, and she would appoint him prime minister if she was able to, if they won the National Assembly elections. That's a very strong ticket. And that was the original idea that she had before she was convicted in this embezzlement of EU funds court case last year. So, they've been building up their power and their popularity over many years, partly helped by the fact that Marine Le Pen kind of normalized the party. She got rid of its image of, neo-fascism and racism quite effectively in the views of the French people, which, that was the way the party was seen under her father. It was a bit of a fringe party, a bit of a neo-Nazi party in some ways. And she's completely changed that and now is in with a very good chance of winning the presidential election next year.
Harim Sada, obviously the issue of this electronic tag is still out there. Can you just explain the legal consequences of this? Because we do know that Marine Le Pen has said that that is going to be a huge issue before this, in the lead up to the election.
Yes, I think it's, as far as I know, the first time that such a situation occurs. Knowing that the electronic monetary period does not begin immediately, it starts only once the electronic bracelet tag has actually been fitted. And it can take months considering the delay of the justice system, and which obviously will actually go faster because she is running for election. And in the most favorable scenario, Le Pen could therefore still be campaigning under electronic monitoring during a significant part of the presidential election. But we have to go to see the symbolic of it. When you are under electronic tag, you need to have the approval to travel, to go out of your granted zone. And when you run for a presidential election, you have to travel at every corner of mainland France, but also in overseas territories, also in spontaneous appearances, like in Sunday's market or during TV interviews, and so on and so forth. So, and of course, judicial authorities can adapt this. But I think regarding the symbolic, we have two sides. You have people saying that the RN is victim of the system, the judicial elite is going after the women of the people. And at the same time, you have someone, a convicted person, running for the highest job in the country. And I think, and I do agree with that, I think it will serve her purpose. And it's beyond symbolic here. It is an electronic tag. She is considered like a criminal right now, running for election.
Bruno, if we can bring you back in on this, obviously, is there a risk that, especially the electronic tag issue and the repercussions of all of that, does she risk becoming an embarrassment, or that issue become an embarrassment as well as a potential handicap? Because how are the French voters going to see this, do you think? Those that she will be trying to draw towards her party and vote for her in the election, not necessarily the supporters that have been with her along her journey?
Obviously, this is an extremely unusual situation for the French presidential election. We have never been that case. So I guess that obviously having the bracelet is obviously not a good point for Marine Le Pen. No one actually can take a positive issue on that, including Marine Le Pen. So obviously it would embarrass Marine Le Pen for her campaign. But as we said just before, also she can use it, depending her communication strategy, depending on the way that she's going to behave with this. But eventually she could use that as a victim of the system. She could use it also to say to the French that she's just an ordinary citizen, that she's like them. Actually, she's not perfect. And if she commits error, then she receives sanction. And eventually, in the context of French politics, with an amazing level of public opinion exasperation with the situation of the country, you probably know the budget and economic situation of France, which is extremely, extremely worrying. The economists are saying that our deficits are out of control. So in that particular situation, we just don't know. It could be that obviously it is not good and positive for Marine Le Pen, but the context of the country with budget deficits at the highest, with Emmanuel Macron that gives the feeling that he doesn't care any longer about the country, just looking for international situation and not looking any longer to the country. In that particular context, everything can happen, including that finally the electorate is saying, okay, Marine Le Pen, this is your turn.
Okay, the change for change's sake, if I can pick up on what you're saying there, Bruno. Victor, how is all of this being viewed outside of France? Does it change how some of Marine Le Pen's allies and other far-right movements elsewhere will view her? Or do you think that they're going to double down on their support for her and her party?
I think most of these elections really take place in the domestic sphere. I don't think it's that important for the outcome of elections in France what other people think. And in fact, Marine Le Pen and Jordan Bardella, her sidekick, they have been very careful for example, to distance themselves from Donald Trump, who's seen as toxic in Europe, including in France. So I'm not sure that what other countries think is really going to have much impact. I think, as Bruno said, it's really going to be a lot about the economy. And there is this kind of visceral dislike and anger at the establishment, which means the current president and a lot of the other mainstream political parties. There is a kind of this kind of divisions in society we've seen all over the world, and it's happening in France as well, where the establishment is despised and people want something different. So even though, the far right in the form of Marine Le Pen's party, Rassemblement National, does not have a very coherent economic policy, it's not clear that that's going to matter much, in the same way that it didn't matter much for Donald Trump that he didn't have a coherent economic policy. And I think, it's really going to be fought on domestic issues and not on international relations, although, of course, the far right has to be very careful not to be associated with toxic, foreign politicians like Donald Trump.
Right. Rimsa, if I can bring you back in here. Should someone, you touched on this a little earlier, but should someone who's been convicted of embezzlement even be allowed to run for a political office, especially president? Because what are the ramifications, the repercussions legally for France in the future here?
I mean, in a perfect world, no one should be allowed to run for the highest office in the country. But we have seen many cases of politicians running for a presidential election, despite being convicted multiple times, not necessarily with an electronic tag, but trials for corruption is quite a French tradition at this point, and I'm merely joking here. But I think the point is also the political consequences is how it's going to be used. Because don't forget as well that Marine Le Pen lodged an appeal before the Court of Cassation, which, again, is going to give its decision in a pretty short time regarding the presidential election calendar. But again, she is going to play it, and she will use argument about how the system has been broken to the point of being elevated to probably martyrdom or something. So, no, in theory, it should not be the case, but sadly, history and many politicians have been doing that. And I think this case is going to take the matter lower about how we consider our politicians who have a duty of probity. Again, she has been accused of embezzlement of taxpayers' money. It is not nothing. Now, the question is, how is she going to use that? We have talked about that before.
OK. Bruno, how is she going to actually run this campaign? What do you expect to see and hear from her?
I'm expected to see the Rassemblement National back to its basics, I would say, which is actually to accuse all the other parties that they are responsible for the French situation, that those people who have governed the country for decades and decades, and particularly the last decade with Emmanuel Macron, are directly responsible for our budget situation, our socioeconomic situation. So I am expected the Rassemblement National to campaign on its habitual lines, which is our anti-establishment, immigration, telling the French that their program could be financed if we would reshuffle completely our European policies. So, and I'm expected also Marine Le Pen to accentuate the strongest point of the image of Marine Le Pen in the electorate, which is that she's like you and me, that she's close to the people, that she's absolutely not like Emmanuel Macron, that she's exactly the opposite of Macron. And so I'm expected Marine Le Pen to show to her electorate that she's back.
Right. Victor, the centre-right and the left are particularly fractured at this point in time in France. Does that hand Marine Le Pen an advantage, and who is best placed to try and take her on?
Yeah, I mean, that is absolutely the case. The centre-left, the socialists and the centre-right are completely in a mess at the moment. I mean, they may come up with united candidates who will represent a large proportion of voters, but that's certainly not the case at the moment. And indeed, the Républicains, the centre-right party, the traditional centre-right party that has run France for much of the Fifth Republic, is very divided even now, even after Éric Ciotti, who was the leader of the party, actually defected to the far right and gave 16 of his MPs to Marine Le Pen. So it is a real strength for the far right that the other parties are very weak at the moment and very divided. The only plausible candidate at the moment, anyway, who can sort of perhaps represent enough of the center left and the center right is someone like Edouard Philippe, the mayor of Le Havre, who was Macron's prime minister. But he is very much a figure of the establishment. So if a lot of voters are going to vote against the establishment, then they might end up voting against him and for Marine Le Pen. So it's not a shoo-in, but at the moment he's the most uniting candidate for the rest of France that opposes Marine Le Pen.
Rimsada, why isn't there another attractive candidate that can really stand up and push back against some of the rhetoric, some of the nationalistic rhetoric that we've been hearing from Marine Le Pen for decades now?
Well, I think that one of the problem is that the ideology of the far right has not only normalized itself, but French politics, and like from left to right, really has to some extent moved toward this ideology. And whether it's the center right or a fraction of the Socialist Party, even they're increasingly speaking the language of the far right: immigration control, national identity, sovereignty, the disastrous economic situation we are in. But that doesn't mean that these parties necessarily have become the far right, but it also means that issues and elements of language that once were politically taboo, marginal, have become the mainstream. And part of this explanation, I think, it doesn't explain everything, but it's a huge part of it, is how the RN has pursued for years, even for decades, actually, a strategy of dédiabolisation. So under Marine, and the explanation also lies with the rest of the political system. Mainstream parties have increasingly adopted tougher position on certain controversial issues, such as security and immigration, etc. And as a consequence, the RN no longer appears as exceptional, as it once did. And in respects to that, the boundaries of acceptable political discourse have shifted. And I think, and I will close with that the RN greatest political victory may not be yet winning the election. It may be changing the agenda. When the other parties adopt like your rhetoric, your themes, you have already exercised a huge amount, considerable political influence, regardless of whether you hold office or not.
Okay. Bruno, what's Macron's role in all of this? Is he... why do you think that he hasn't been able to provide a clear successor, someone that can stand up and take charge?
Yes, I would even say that Macron actually refused to indicate who is the successor. Edouard Philippe and Gabriel Attal are obviously the two natural successors of Emmanuel Macron. But since the 2024 election, the dissolution, okay, Macron actually is only preoccupied and only focused on international politics. And so he has a responsibility on that, because the feeling in the country that is particularly favorable to the Rassemblement National is that nothing worked in the country, which is the habitual rhetoric of the Rassemblement National, which is to say, you never try. You have tried the left with François Hollande, you have tried the right with Nicolas Sarkozy, you have tried the center with Emmanuel Macron, and at the end of that, nothing works any longer in the country. Huge deficit, amazing tax, public sector, particularly the hospitals, that doesn't work, which is obviously the argument of the Rassemblement National. And they are going to say that obviously you can't, they are going to say to the French, you can't just elect a successor of Macron, because it will be exactly the same story.
Victor, you're probably best placed amongst many people to talk to us about what a Marine Le Pen presidency would actually look like. What do you think we should expect if she does become president?
I think we should expect, if they win control of the National Assembly as well as of the Elysee Palace, and that would require them to win the legislative elections that will follow. Then if they win both of those sets of elections, then they will have really untrammeled power. And I think it would be quite dramatic for France and for Europe. First of all, you'd see a dramatic reduction in immigration. They would try to change the constitution to eliminate the universality of French belief for liberty, equality, and human rights for all, because that would only apply to citizens, not to somebody who happens to be living in France and who hopes to be a citizen. They would eliminate birthright citizenship, which is, you have a path to citizenship if you're born in France. A lot would change, and particularly on that core issue of immigration, which of course is a very MAGA issue around the world. Even though, as one of my colleagues was saying just now, that is it's a kind of global phenomenon that governments, including left-wing governments, are taking quite a hard line on migration. So it would be very dramatic. It would also be very dramatic for Europe, the European Union, which would find itself severely weakened by having a nationalist government in power in France, which of course is one of the key, the cornerstones of the European Union. And Marine Le Pen and Bardella definitely want to weaken the Europeans' kind of centralizing control over regulations, climate regulations, for example, that apply to all the member states of the European Union.
Rimsara, given what Victor has outlined there, what Marine Le Pen presidency could actually look like, do you see the centre, right and the left actually coalescing behind one candidate to try and prevent that, or have we moved beyond that at this point?
Well, first of all, I think that unfortunately, on the matter of law, she will have everything served to her on a silver platter. We already have a system, unfortunately, that has over the past decades weakened human rights, civil liberties. Many of our laws actually are very restricted regarding certain freedoms, especially. And unfortunately, once these people are in power, they usually keep it for a long time. And as for your question, the problem is France is so polarized right now. And so our current political elite just forget to work for the common good and to ally. So, for example, the left itself is polarized. We have seen that in the latest legislative election, but also the municipal elections. As for the right, same thing. The traditional right is actually divided into 2, maybe 3 or 4 different camps. And divide and conquer. I mean, the far right knows that very well.
Unfortunately, we have run out of time, but we do thank you all for joining us here on Inside Story. Bruno, Rimsara and Victor, thank you again for your insight. Thank you too for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website. That's aljazeera.com. For further discussion, you can go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. You can also join the conversation on X. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. For now, that's all from me, Tom McRae, and the team here. Al Jazeera's coverage continues in just a moment. Make sure you stay tuned.